Hi, welcome back for those of you who are with us at the prior sessions. So once again, I'm Dorene Rettas. I'm the co-founder of Cybersecurity Tribe. And again, I'm going to thank our sponsor because I can't leave them out, Oasis. So this is the final session on non-human identity, the risk, the reality, and how to manage. In this last session, how leading organizations solve security challenges, solved security challenges, Roey Rozi, the Director of Solution Architecture with Oasis Security, is going to discuss specific hurdles that organizations have faced with non-human identity security across a rapidly growing cloud environment prior to adopting a non-human identity management platform. This session is also going to provide insights into how companies have implemented lifecycle automation capabilities to drastically reduce the risks of breaches while improving operational efficiency. So for those who weren't on previously, I just want to point out a couple of things. We have a chat functionality in the bottom right. In there, you can respond to one another. We can respond to you as well. There's also a questions widget. That question widget allows you to ask just the moderator questions. And then finally, there's an apps little icon there, and within there are handouts. So I believe there are 4 handouts that you can access and download during the event. So good to see you again, Rosie, and I'm happy to have you with us to share a little bit about a case study. So with that, I'm going to let you take it over.
Thank you so much, Dorene. So what I've been doing for the last 2 years is, in Oasis, I've been implementing projects to manage and secure non-human identities. So different styles of organization, different priorities, and different types of teams. And what I want to share with you guys today is a bit about the different types of organizations we saw, how each organization approached this problem differently, and how a plan to tackle non-human identities looks like. And you can take this to yourself, use it either with a do-it-yourself or with a tool, because the plan is very similar, it's just the steps will slightly vary. So I wanted to start with talking about the different types of organizations and how I like to look at them in terms of how their plan will look like. So I'll share a bit of my screen here. And what we've noticed is that organizations are somewhere in the scale between risk-oriented and governance-oriented. So a very risk-oriented organization is all about, okay, we're going to have a breach one day. How do we respond? How do we rotate everything? How do we do it correctly? They think like they saw Cloudflare breach, what Cloudflare had to do. We're going to have that one day. How do we approach that? It's all about anomaly detection, finding it, and then response. On the other far side, it's organizations that are all about policies and governance. So they will define clear policies, and they're looking to efficiently manage them, basically saying, all NHIs should be rotated every 90 days. Great. How do we efficiently do that? It's all about automation. Or maybe every unused account should be disabled, 30 days, 90 days, 1 year, but should be disabled completely. And they have processes, and they really want to adhere to those processes and make sure they're happening, get audits, reporting, etc. And
Roey, can I jump in and ask you a question on this? Do you often see that it's dictated by the industry?
Yeah, so industry affects this a lot. For example, financial institutions and healthcare, which are more regulated, are often more governance-oriented, where think smaller organizations that don't have a specific identity personnel might go more risk-oriented. So size of team, size of organization, and how regulated it is are the main factors if it goes right or left.
Glad to know my assumption was correct. Thank you.
Yeah. And we've also seen, I think during I'm going to show a use case of how we did a project, and we sometimes see organizations that start a bit risk-oriented and then move over to governance-oriented as they mature. Very common kind of movement that we see. But some start here and some start there. So we've seen everything. So I mentioned that different team structures affect a lot how the plan looks like. So I wanted to share a bit with you, Dorene, what are the different stakeholders we see in such a non-human identity project. So we always have the CISO or executive, be VP of identity or something like that, who has high-level initiatives. He wants to see the problem solved. He wants metrics. He wants reporting. He wants to see reviews, and he wants to make sure it's properly addressed. That's the first stakeholder we always look at. A second stakeholder, which is very, very interesting, is security architecture. Now, Dorene, do you maybe have a guess why security architecture is so important for non-human identities? Sorry for putting you on the spot.
Yeah, I was going to say nothing like throwing me on the spot. No, I don't, but I guarantee that you're going to have a really good answer for me.
Yeah, so often, because non-human identity is such a new thing, we have teams that are responsible for classic human identities, but this is a new problem. So there isn't someone who's particularly responsible for it yet a lot of the times. And security architecture we see are often like, this is a big problem. We need to approach it. We need a tool. We need a strategy. They will build a basic plan, and then they will find someone in the organization who will adopt and implement that plan. So that person could be either a cloud security or a cloud administrator or an identity administrator. Think the person who used to manage Active Directory and now getting more responsibility. And in smaller organizations, it might be SOC, just because they're already very used to getting more responsibilities as an organization. So we've seen both, depending usually on the size of the organization.
I don't want to jump ahead too much, and you may be getting into this, but do you think that's going to change over time? Do you think that there will be a stakeholder that's specifically focused on that?
I'm pretty sure it's going to happen. I think my guess is that a few processes will be happening. First of all, regulations and auditors are going to be much more interested in non-human identities as well. We see PCI leading this initiative with a lot of new things they put in their 4.0 standard about non-human identities. They call them system accounts. And I'm assuming the frameworks and other auditors will follow through, and then we'll find experts and full-time employees who will be responsible for this, just like we have today, full teams for human identities.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. And it's going to be necessary. We know that.
Yeah, for sure. But we might be surprised. Maybe it will be part of the cloud team who will take on this responsibility, because cloud will become such a major player. And they're very techie people usually, and will be able to do that. So might go a different way, but I'm sure it'll be a big part on many plates.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, though, the most important part for a successful non-human identity initiative is to have an administrator who this is his responsibility. Exactly like you said, having an administrator who has the right permissions, who knows what metrics to track, and is doing the work and getting the progress and operationalizing and enforcing those policies. Terrific. So just a bit of how a project like this can look like. And this is a bit of framework that we develop with our different customers on how to do a project. And it's the same if you're using a tool or not using a tool. And the first part is the kickoff. We need to plan milestones, success criteria, understand the environments, map the stakeholders, understand how we're going to approach it and what we're trying to achieve. Very simple, like any project. Then during the onboarding, we start with centralizing, which is basically creating an inventory, making sure all of the data, all of the identities are managed in one place. Small organization, Excel is fine. Larger organization, you might need a dedicated tool like Oasis. Then we do an overview, understand the patterns, what are the problems, what are the main issues. And then what I like to do as the first step is to solve like the top 5 issues. Find the top 5 things we need to solve. Think of like a third-party contractor, administrator that's been there for 10 years unused with admin permissions for everything. Let's just disable this account. We can then solve like 5 main big issues. And during that process, we see how it works. Who defines policy? Who does the work? Who does it need to notify? How do we do reporting? How do we do auditing? And after we do that a couple of times manually, we can re-identify the stakeholders and define a process, understand how it works. And this is often where all the pieces fit in, and we understand how we can approach a problem and scale. for the entire
What
organization.
what do you mean when you're talking about re-identifying stakeholders and why, right?
I'll share with you a story. So we
Yeah.
were working with this identity team, and we mapped with them all of the identities, created a full inventory, and we found 300 accounts that were unused for over 2 years. Great. Now they wanted to disable them. But then they saw, wait, we don't have the permissions to disable. We just have reader permissions into the identities. It's the cloud team that manages those identities for us. So we now re-identify that we need a stakeholder in the cloud team with the right permissions that will let them open a ticket for him or give them the permissions. And we had to define a process with them on how it's done and we didn't know at the beginning of the project that we're going to need their support. Now we know to ask the questions in advance, but it's often that because it's a new process, you need to identify the stakeholders after you try to do the manual process a couple of times.
Would you say that you're only re-identifying those stakeholders one time, or can it sometimes happen multiple times throughout the project?
It can for sure happen multiple times, but I think after you do a few manual operations, you get like 90% of the picture.
Okay, thank you.
And then that's when you go scale, right? So you did it a couple of times, you re-identify the stakeholders. Now you can put in the ITSM integrations, the ServiceNows and the Jiras, get it hooked up with your CMDB, your organizational databases, and then you can start doing things at scale, operationalizing it across different scopes. And usually the process we'll go in is make sure everything has an owner assigned to it, then decommission all the unused identities, and then start doing rotation and enforcing least privilege on what we have left. And going scope by scope and doing this with like a wide movement across the organization. This is the clean up the mess step.
How long does, and I'm sure the audience is thinking this, right, when you look at this slide, so how long does a project typically take? And I'm sure there's lots of variables, right?
So it usually takes around a couple of months, what I've currently talked about, but it's all about the scope you define. And the best thing to do is to define a scope that can be cleaned up in about 2 to 3 months, and then you can see results straight away. And then you're happy and you can expand the scope. It's all about getting the managers happy at the end of the day, and everyone too will get to keep their job and get their bonuses.
I got to be honest. I mean, for a project, 2 to 3 months does not sound, too bad, to say the least. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, once we do the initial cleanup, we will want to have what we call the stop the bleeding part, which is where we can define automations and automatic policy enforcement to make sure everything is done automatically, and then just having to touch up every once in a while. And then we can have a good time and relax at the end.
Stop the bleeding.
Yeah. Very classic. You clean up the mess and then you stop the bleeding.
Yeah. Perfect.
So, Dorene, do you want to see like a sample project with timelines and everything?
Yeah, that would be very helpful.
All right. So this is an example project with one of our design partners. And so it's very early on in Oasis. I think it's like one of the first projects we did. And this is a financial institution that moved over from more risk-oriented to governance-oriented during the process. So how did that look like? We started connecting to lower environments, right? Lower risk, easier to manage, like dev and like staging and things that are not operational, not non-production. We did discovery, we looked at issues, we saw what they're not doing and where they can be better, presented like a summary report and understood, okay, this is what we're not doing, this is roughly the size that we have, let's start. Then we went operationalizing, and then doing it manually a few times, re-identifying the stakeholders, defining the process, and then got to the point where, okay, we know how to do it in our dev environment, let's connect to production. Defining goals, and then starting to go and achieve those. And within 2 to 3 months, you can get to the point where you cover all of the top issues you wanted to solve. Decommission all of the stale identities, rotate all of the privileged ones, got to the point where everything is secure.
So, And I know Ryan mentioned this in our very first session today, but for this example that you're giving, why was Azure chosen as the starting point for the project?
Great question. It's usually easier when you're using a third-party tool to start with a cloud, where it's easier to integrate and connect. And it's also a great, so that's one reason. But the second reason is also most of the cloud assets are internet-facing by design. They're used for microservices that are connecting one to another, SaaS platforms. So there's a lot of risk there. All you need to access super sensitive information is just one key, and that's it. No firewalls, no nothing. So both in terms of ease of use and also in terms of priority for the organization.
Okay. So this is really their starting point, if you will.
Yeah. And after we did this and defined policies and we got to the stop the bleeding part, we expanded the scope. So then we tackled the hardest one, which is on-prem Active Directory, and started tackling those legacy applications, which is more challenging, but once you've done it in one place, it's easier to expand.
I don't want to keep interrupting you, so I'll try to stop, but questions come up as you're talking. Can you talk a little bit about the process for defining the policies and also why that's so important?
Yeah. So I'll use an example from this account. And what happened here is we wanted to disable or decommission stale identities. And at the beginning, we contacted owners of an identity that was unused for about a year and told them, hey, do you still need this? And they're like, I don't even know what this is, or this is an old project, I forgot about it, feel free. After we've done it a couple of times, we understood that if we just define a policy that says every identity that's not in use for a year is automatically disabled, or we'll give you a week notice, and if you don't answer, we'll disable it, something like that, we can do it in scale and much faster. So the defining policies part lets the administrator move much faster, and no one's going to be mad at him because he's following policy, right? And if the policy is correct and fits the organization, you can move a lot quicker and achieve the goals much better.
Thank you. Makes sense.
Yeah. And it's been great. And then you define policies, and then you can enforce them, and then you can keep everything secure, and you don't have to go with a case-by-case basis.
I like how simple you make that sound.
At the end of the day, it's all about simplicity, right? You have to understand the tech and then give you clear guidelines on how to approach it in order to solve the problem. Otherwise, it's impossible to do in scale. We're talking tens of thousands of identities. So you have to do it in scale by policy. Okay, so Dorene, is there any kind of thing that pops up into your head about something you've learned today from this?
Yeah, I'm intrigued and interested on that risk-oriented versus government-oriented, right? Mm-hmm. And we talked a little bit about industries, of course, but in this case, you talked about an organization who sort of moved along in the journey, right? So do you mind just getting into that a little bit further?
Yeah, for sure. So I think at the beginning, it's very easy to be all about the risk. But when you learn more and you have more tooling and your maturity grows up, it's much more efficient and effective to move over to governance. I always like to say, if you rotate an identity every week, you don't need to worry about it being exposed because it's going to be rotated tomorrow anyways. So once an organization gets to that level of maturity, they can go to a more governance approach, and that's much easier to maintain for the long run and much safer. But it just requires a higher level of maturity and investment to get there.
Thank you.
And I think 5 years from now or 10 years from now, maybe even less, this will be a standard across all industries, and we'll have standard tooling and frameworks and to do this. And a note for me to any executive leader who is looking to empower his team and learn more and be innovative, I would suggest you start doing this now. It'll be great for your people. They'll learn a lot. They'll advance and secure the organization, but also lead this process. And it's really, really exciting, an exciting place to be in. So I highly recommend doing it.
And I will say, one of the reasons we were excited, Cybersecurity Tribe, to partner with Oasis, not just for this, but in all the things we've done, is because we see the true risks of not managing those non-human identities. And our goal, obviously, is to provide information that's beneficial to the cybersecurity industry to ensure that they're doing everything they can to protect their organization. And so I think and I appreciate, Rosie, that you didn't go deep into, Oasis. It is important for our viewers to know that your solution is helping organizations to really solve this challenge and reduce the risk, which is, as we talked about, a necessity today. It's not a question of whether it should be or shouldn't be. Did you have anything else that we didn't touch on that you wanted an opportunity to talk about with the audience?
Yeah, I'll give one sentence on Oasis. Oasis is a platform that was built from the ground up to do this exact process, to inventory, prioritize, help you define policies, operationalize, and then enforce them in a wide automatic way. That's what we're built to do. That's the only thing we do. And excited to go on a journey like this with anyone who's interested.
So my final statement is, I speak to CISOs all day, and anytime that I've brought up Oasis, everyone seems to have heard of you guys by now. And the response is widely, yeah, I'm really interested in what they're doing, or I'm really excited by what they're doing, or wow, that's a great company. So that speaks volumes about your team, you. Thank you. I want to again thank you for joining me, not for just one, but two sessions and providing knowledge. Remind those who are on right now, if you didn't get a chance and want to download any of those handouts, including the report we have on non-human identity management, you can still access that here. If you need to reach out to any of us at any point, feel free to. But thank you for joining us. Thank you, Roey, and thank you, Oasis. With that, I'm going to let everybody enjoy the rest of their day.
Thank you.